The crack of a single rifle shot echoed across the mountainous terrain of Afghanistan. In that frozen moment of 2018, a female sniper had just delivered a shot that would become legend. Through swirling crosswinds at 200 yards, the bullet found its target with surgical precision, saving an entire SEAL team caught in a Taliban ambush. The team commander would later report, "It was the kind of shot you hear about but never witness, the kind that changes what you believe is possible." How did a weapons maintenance specialist transform into one of the deadliest snipers in U.S. military history? The answer begins 8 years earlier in a quiet armory at Fort Braxton, Arizona, where excellence hid in plain sight. Fort Braxton 2010. The armory lights flickered on at 5:30 a.m. hours before the base would stir to life. Emma Reynolds moved through the cavernous room with practiced efficiency, her boots making soft impressions on the concrete floor. At 26, Emma was a weapons maintenance specialist who understood firearms with an intuition that bordered on the supernatural. She moved to her workbench where an array of M4A1 carbines awaited inspection. Her colleagues often spoke of her unusual talent. Emma could field strip and reassemble an M4A1 following full mil-spec protocols in 2 minutes and 47 seconds, a base record that had stood for 3 years. Her small frame and delicate hands belied the strength and precision with which she handled the military hardware. Reynolds has ears that can diagnose an M24's issue just by the sound of its firing pin. Master Sergeant William Brooks had once remarked to a visiting officer, "But she's never been given the chance to show what she can really do." At 59, Brooks managed the armory with the meticulous attention of a man who had spent 40 years in service. His weathered face told stories of deployments that spanned from the jungles of Panama to the deserts of Operation Desert Storm. His silver hair was cut to regulation perfection, and his eyes missed nothing, especially not talent. Emma worked silently, losing herself in the mechanical precision that had become her sanctuary. The smell of gun oil and metal filled her senses as she methodically inspected, cleaned, and calibrated each weapon. To most soldiers, she was invisible, just another support specialist maintaining the tools they would use. But there was more to Emma Reynolds than most people realized. Her story began far from Fort Braxton on a sprawling Montana ranch where the big sky stretched endlessly above rolling plains and rugged mountains. It was 1991 as the Cold War drew to its close, and 7-year-old Emma Reynolds squeezed the trigger of a rifle for the first time. "I fired my first shot when I was 7 years old," Emma would later recall. "And in that moment, I knew it was what I was born to do." Her grandfather, Master Sergeant James Reynolds, stood beside her, his steady hands helping to support the Remington 700 that seemed massive against her small frame. But Emma showed no fear, only concentration beyond her years, as she peered through the iron sights at a tin can positioned 100 yards away. "Breathe in," her grandfather instructed, his voice calm and measured. "Now halfway out. Hold. Feel your heartbeat. Find the space between beats. That's when you squeeze." The rifle cracked and the can flew into the air. Emma's face lit up with pure joy as her grandfather's weathered hand rested proudly on her shoulder. "Natural talent?" He nodded, a rare smile breaking through his typically stoic expression. James Reynolds was no ordinary grandfather. A legendary figure in military circles, he had served as a sniper instructor at Fort Benning after completing multiple tours in Special Forces operations. His expertise had shaped an entire generation of elite marksmen during the height of the Cold War. "Your grandfather wasn't just a sniper," Brooks would tell Emma years later. "He was the man who trained the men they wrote books about." Throughout her childhood, Emma spent every summer and holiday at her grandfather's ranch absorbing knowledge that few civilian children or even military recruits would ever access. James taught her about ballistics and trajectory, about how the .308 Winchester round behaved in different atmospheric conditions. He showed her how to read wind patterns by watching grass movement, how temperature affected powder burn rates, and how to calculate bullet drop at extreme distances. Most importantly, he taught her techniques that weren't in any manual methods developed during classified Cold War operations when American snipers needed every advantage against Soviet counterparts. In sniper work, he would tell her, "It's not the rifle or the bullet that determines the outcome. It's the heart and mind of the person pulling the trigger." Their bond went beyond the shooting range. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and James would share sanitized versions of his missions, teaching Emma about duty honor and the responsibility that came with exceptional skill. The purpose of a sniper is not to take life, he once told her, as they watched the Montana sunset paint the mountains gold. It's to protect those who cannot protect themselves. One perfect shot can save 100 lives. The summer Emma turned 17, everything changed. Her grandfather, once seemingly indestructible, grew frail. Cancer had infiltrated his body, the doctor said, likely from exposure to toxic chemicals during classified operations decades earlier. Government records remained sealed, and veterans' compensation claims were denied. Emma spent that final summer by his bedside listening to stories that grew more detailed as James worried less about operational security and more about passing on his legacy. On a clear July morning with sunlight streaming through the window of his bedroom, James Reynolds handed Emma two treasures, his personal Remington 700 rifle and a worn leather notebook filled with handwritten notes from his career. "This book contains everything I know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Things they don't teach anymore. Things they've forgotten. Things that might save your life someday if you follow this path." Emma took the book with trembling hands, tears streaming down her face. "Promise me you'll use your gift," he said, squeezing her hand. "Promise me you'll serve with honor." "I promise," Emma whispered. He died the next day. The funeral was attended by men who arrived in unmarked cars and spoke in hushed tones about classified operations from decades past. They approached Emma one by one, sharing brief stories about how her grandfather had saved their lives or taught them skills that had preserved American interests during the darkest days of the Cold War. One silver-haired general pulled her aside. "Your grandfather was a patriot of the highest order," he said, "the kind of American they don't make anymore. His work during operations in East Germany and Afghanistan in the 80s saved countless lives. Remember that." The 17-year-old girl nodded solemnly, the leather notebook tucked securely in her jacket pocket. The following year, Emma enlisted in the Army. It was 2002, and America was still reeling from the attacks of September 11th. The war on terror was ramping up, with operations in Afghanistan already underway and the invasion of Iraq on the horizon. Emma's goal was clear. She wanted to become a sniper, to follow in her grandfather's footsteps, and use her inherited talent to protect American forces. Basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia, revealed what her grandfather had already known. Emma Reynolds was an exceptional shot. During rifle qualification with the standard-issue M16A2, Emma scored 498 out of 500 points, the highest score in the history of her training battalion. Her drill sergeants were astounded. "Reynolds shoots like she was born with a rifle in her hands," one remarked after watching her place 30 consecutive rounds into the center mass of targets ranging from 50 to 300 meters. But when assignments came, Emma received devastating news. Despite her extraordinary marksmanship scores, she would not be going into combat arms. In 2002, combat roles, especially sniper positions, remained closed to women. Instead, the Army recognized her mechanical aptitude and assigned her to weapons maintenance. "We need good people maintaining our firearms," her company commander explained, avoiding her eyes. "Your technical scores show you have an excellent understanding of mechanical systems. You'll serve your country by ensuring our warfighters have reliable equipment." Emma accepted the decision with outward stoicism, though inside she felt her grandfather's legacy slipping away. She couldn't help but wonder if he would be disappointed that his prized student would be cleaning weapons rather than using them in defense of her nation. For 8 years, Emma Reynolds worked in armories across the Army, eventually landing at Fort Braxton. Her reputation for technical excellence grew. Soldiers specifically requested that she service their weapons before deployments or competitions. What few knew was that during these years, Emma never stopped practicing her marksmanship. On weekends, she would drive to civilian ranges far from base, where no one knew her, and practice the techniques her grandfather had taught her. Master Sergeant Brooks discovered her secret one Saturday when he happened to visit a remote range 60 miles from Fort Braxton. He watched in amazement as Emma consistently placed rounds into a target at 800 yards of distance that challenged even experienced military snipers. After that day, Brooks became her quiet advocate at Fort Braxton. He ensured she had access to the base range during off hours and occasionally slipped her specialized ammunition for practice. He recognized in Emma the same qualities he had seen in the legendary snipers he'd served alongside in Special Forces operations. "There are two kinds of people in the military," Brooks told her one morning as they worked alone in the armory. "Those who fight and those who make sure the guns work so others can fight. But sometimes, rarely, there's a third kind, those who can do both better than anyone else. Emma looked up from the rifle she was servicing. Your grandfather was that third kind, Brooks continued, and so are you. It was during these years that Emma encountered Lieutenant Daniel Carter, the leader of Fort Braxton's elite sniper detachment. Carter was 32, a decorated Iraq War veteran with 14 confirmed kills. His unit operated the most advanced long-range precision rifles in the USS Arsenal, the bolt-action M24 sniper weapon system, and the semi-automatic M110 semi-automatic sniper system. Carter took great pride in his reputation as Fort Braxton's premier marksman. His office walls displayed certificates from sniper competitions across the country, and he frequently lectured junior officers about the importance of marksmanship as a tactical force multiplier. What Carter didn't know was that his prize competition rifle, the M24, with which he had set several base records, received special maintenance from Emma at Brooks' request. Brooks had noticed subtle issues with the weapon's trigger, assembly, and barrel harmonics that only someone with Emma's expertise could properly address. He thinks it's his skill, Brooks once remarked with a wry smile after Carter won yet another competition. And he is skilled, but he has no idea how much better his rifle performs because of your work. Emma took quiet pride in her contribution, never seeking recognition. She understood the value of remaining invisible, a lesson her grandfather had taught her about the psychology of the perfect sniper. The morning that changed everything began like any other. Emma arrived at the armory at 5:30 a.m. and began preparing a batch of M24 sniper rifles for the quarterly marksmanship evaluation. The base commander had mandated that all sniper teams recertify every 3 months to maintain readiness standards. She was carefully cleaning the bolt assembly of an M24 when she heard voices approaching from the corridor. Lieutenant Carter and his team were walking past their conversation, carrying clearly through the partially open door. Another perfect score at the 800-yard line, Carter was saying, his voice carrying the unmistakable tone of self-satisfaction. Honestly, these qualification standards are too easy. They should push it out to 1,000 yards just to separate the real snipers from the pretenders. Emma continued working, trying to ignore the conversation. She had heard similar boasts countless times before. I heard the new batch of recruits couldn't hit targets consistently at 300 yards, one of Carter's team members commented. Standards are slipping, Carter replied with a laugh that grated against Emma's nerves. That's what happens when they lower the bar for political correctness. Some people are born for this work. Others should stick to cleaning weapons and staying in the rear where they belong. The comment stung more than Emma wanted to admit. She gripped the rifle in her hands tighter, her knuckles whitening as she forced herself to maintain her composure. This wasn't the first time she had overheard dismissive comments about support personnel, but Carter's tone carried a particular arrogance that made her jaw clench. As the voices faded down the corridor, Emma found herself staring at the M24 in her hands. With a start, she realized it was Carter's personal competition rifle, the one she had maintained meticulously for over 2 years. She knew every component of this weapon better than Carter ever would. She had adjusted its scope countless times, replaced worn parts before they could affect accuracy, and ensured its perfect calibration through hundreds of rounds. Yet Carter received all the credit when this rifle performed flawlessly during competitions and training exercises. He posed for photos with his trophies, while Emma remained invisible in the background, the person whose expertise made his success possible. As she continued her maintenance routine, Emma noticed something concerning a slight irregularity in the trigger assembly that could affect accuracy at extreme ranges. It was a subtle issue that only someone with her specialized knowledge would detect, a microscopic burr on the sear that would create inconsistency in trigger brake pressure. Emma could fix it easily, but something stopped her. Instead of documenting the issue in the maintenance log as protocol required, she quietly made the adjustment without recording it. It was a small act of rebellion, but it gave her a sense of control that had been missing from her military career. That's not standard procedure, Specialist Reynolds. Emma turned to find Master Sergeant Brooks standing in the doorway, his eyes fixed on the unauthorized adjustment she had just completed. Sorry, Sergeant, Emma replied, straightening. I thought it would save time. Brooks stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. I heard Lieutenant Carter and his team passing by earlier. They're not known for their quiet conversations. Emma remained silent, unsure how to respond. Did I ever tell you about my time with the 5th Special Forces Group? Brooks asked unexpectedly, picking up a cleaning rod from the workbench. No, Sergeant. We had a saying, the loudest ones in the room are rarely the most capable. Brooks examined the cleaning rod carefully before setting it down. Sometimes the most arrogant people need to learn a lesson in humility. Emma studied Brooks' face, trying to read his intent. Did you know that Colonel James Harrington will be attending tomorrow's sniper qualification? Brooks continued. Emma shook her head. Harrington heads up the selection committee for the new advanced sniper programs. He's looking for exceptional talent. Brooks paused, his eyes meeting Emma's. The kind of talent that might go unnoticed in traditional channels. When the implication hung in the air between them. After 40 years in the military, I've learned that some lessons can only be taught on the firing range. Brooks said, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. How would you feel about participating in tomorrow's qualification as a technical assistant? Emma's heart raced at the suggestion. Technical assistants don't shoot, Sergeant. They do if the evaluation officer requests a demonstration of proper technique, Brooks replied. And as the senior NCO responsible for weapons maintenance, I could make such a request. Emma hesitated. The opportunity was tempting, but the risk was substantial. If she failed publicly, it would only reinforce stereotypes about support personnel. If she succeeded, she might face resentment from combat armed soldiers who would see her as overstepping her role. I don't think that's a good idea, Sergeant, she finally replied. Lieutenant Carter and his team wouldn't appreciate the interference. Brooks nodded slowly, seemingly accepting her decision. He turned to leave but paused at the door. Reaching into his pocket, he withdrew a worn leather notebook that Emma recognized immediately. Your grandfather's journal, Brooks said, holding it out to her. You left it in your locker last week after range practice. I took the liberty of securing it. Emma reached for the notebook with surprise. Thank you, Sergeant. I didn't realize I had forgotten it. Brooks didn't release the notebook immediately. I knew James Reynolds, he said quietly. We served together on several classified operations in Eastern Europe during the 80s. He saved my life more than once. Emma stared at Brooks with new understanding. The connection explained why the master sergeant had taken such an interest in her career. Your grandfather would want you to use what he taught you. Brooks continued, finally releasing the notebook into her hands. He didn't spend all those years training you so you could hide in an armory. Emma clutched the notebook, feeling the weight of her grandfather's legacy. The qualification starts at Euro 800 tomorrow, Brooks said as he walked out. I'll need a technical assistant on the firing line. The choice is yours, Reynolds. As the door closed behind him, Emma opened the worn notebook. Her grandfather's precise handwriting filled the pages with diagrams, calculations, and observations from decades of sniper operations. The knowledge contained within represented generations of hard-won experience, much of it from classified operations during America's shadow war against Soviet influence. One entry caught her eye, dated from 1983 during operations in Afghanistan, supporting Mujahideen forces against Soviet occupation. Today I made a shot that saved 12 men. 100 yards, 15 Mapar crosswind, 30-degree temperature gradient. The Soviet officer never saw it coming. No one believed the shot was possible, including our CIA handlers. But I knew it was. The difference between impossible and possible is preparation, patience, and the willingness to act when others hesitate. Emma closed the book, her decision made. Tomorrow she would honor her grandfather's legacy. Tomorrow she would step out of the shadows. The morning of the qualification dawned clear and crisp, with perfect conditions for long-range shooting. Emma arrived at the armory early to perform final checks on the competition rifles. She paid special attention to Carter's M24, ensuring it was functioning flawlessly. Whatever happened today would be determined by skill alone. As she worked, Emma mentally rehearsed everything her grandfather had taught her about long-range shooting. She could almost hear his voice. Consistency is key. Same cheek weld, same breathing pattern, same trigger squeeze. The rifle is just a tool, you are the weapon. Master Sergeant Brooks entered the armory at 0700, dressed in his range uniform with qualification officer badges prominently displayed. Made your decision, he asked simply. Emma nodded. I'll be your technical assistant today, Sergeant. Brooks smiled. Good. I've already added your name to the range roster. You'll need these. He handed her a set of range credentials identifying her as a technical support specialist authorized to demonstrate proper weapons handling. Colonel Harrington arrived last night, Brooks added. He'll be observing the entire qualification. Word is he's looking for shooters for a new integrated unit concept combining tactical and technical expertise in the same personnel. Emma felt a flutter of anxiety. The stakes had just grown considerably higher. Just do what you know how to do, Brooks advised, seeing her expression. Let your grandfather's training speak for itself. The Fort Braxton Sniper Qualification Range was a sophisticated facility stretching out to 200 yards with automated target systems and advanced environmental monitoring equipment. By the time Emma arrived with the weapons cart, the range was buzzing with activity. 24 snipers from various units were preparing for qualification with Lieutenant Carter's elite 8-man team positioned prominently at the center firing positions. Carter himself stood conversing with a cluster of senior officers, including a silver-haired colonel, whom Emma assumed must be Harrington. Carter's confident posture and animated gestures suggested he was in his element, the center of attention among military brass. Emma positioned her cart at the designated equipment area and began arranging the backup weapons and technical tools. She intended to remain as unobtrusive as possible until Brooks gave her the signal. As she worked, she overheard snippets of conversation from Carter's team. The colonel was asking about Afghanistan deployment potential, one spotter mentioned. Could be our ticket to where the real action is. Carter's pretty much guaranteed a slot after his performance last quarter, another replied. No one else on base can touch his numbers. Emma kept her head down, focusing on her task while monitoring the range preparations. The qualification would begin with standard proficiency tests at 300, 500, and 700 yards before moving to the more challenging 800 and 1,000-yard stations. Brooks approached the equipment area. Colonel Harrington is impressed with our maintenance protocols, he said loudly enough for nearby personnel to hear. He's particularly interested in how technical staff ensure optimal weapon performance in adverse conditions. Emma nodded professionally, recognizing Brooks' statement as the setup it was intended to be. The qualification began promptly at 0800, with Lieutenant Carter demonstrating proper technique for the benefit of Colonel Harrington and the other observers. Emma watched his form with the critical eye of someone who understood both the mechanical and practical aspects of precision shooting. Carter's stance was textbook perfect, his breathing controlled, his trigger pull smooth. But Emma noticed something his admirers missed. He was compensating for a slight tremor in his left hand by adjusting his grip angle, a technique that worked for shorter distances, but would create problems at longer ranges. The first series of shots rang out across the range. Carter performed admirably, scoring nearly perfect results at 300, 500, and 700 yards. The watching officers murmured appreciatively as the targets displayed consistent center mass hits. Excellent shooting, Lieutenant Carter, Colonel Harrington called out. Your reputation is well earned. Carter nodded with practiced modesty that didn't quite mask his satisfaction. Thank you, sir. It's all about fundamentals and consistent practice. As the qualification moved to the 800-yard line, Emma noticed a subtle shift in the atmospheric conditions. The morning air was warming rapidly, creating thermal currents that would affect bullet trajectory. The range flags showed minimal wind, but Emma could see subtle movement in the tall grass surrounding the targets, evidence of ground-level air currents that most shooters would miss. Carter took his position at the 800-yard firing point. Emma watched as he settled behind his rifle-made scope adjustments and prepared for his shot sequence. His first round struck the target just right of center, scoring a 9 out of 10 points. His next 4 shots produced a similar pattern, 9-10, 9-10. Respectable scores certainly, but Emma realized she was watching someone who had reached the limits of their natural ability. Carter was skilled, certainly above average, but he was not the exceptional marksman he believed himself to be. As the qualifications continued, other snipers took their turns, most scoring similarly to Carter. Emma remained by the equipment table, quietly observing and waiting. Brooks occasionally glanced in her direction, but made no move to implement their discussed plan. Then came the 1,000-yard qualification, the true test of advanced marksmanship skill. At this distance, variables that could be ignored at shorter ranges became critical factors. Carter's first shot at this extended range missed the target, entirely sailing high and left. His second attempt scored a 7. The frustration on his face was evident as he adjusted his scope, unaware that his tremor compensation technique was now working against him. Tough conditions, one of his team members commented after his own miss. Wind must be picking up. Emma glanced at the range flags hanging limp in the still air. There was no significant win. The misses were purely technical failures, shooters reaching beyond their skill levels and blaming external factors rather than acknowledging their limitations. After Carter's fifth shot scored another 7, he stepped back from the firing line with obvious annoyance. "This scope needs adjustment," he announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "The calibration is off." Emma felt her jaw tighten. She had calibrated that scope perfectly, just hours earlier, using equipment accurate to fractions of a degree. Carter was blaming his tools rather than examining his technique, the cardinal sin among true firearms professionals. Master Sergeant Brooks approached Carter. "Is there a problem with the equipment, Lieutenant?" Carter turned, adjusting his shooting glasses. "The scope isn't holding zero properly. Something's off with the elevation adjustment." Brooks nodded thoughtfully. "We should check that immediately. Technical issues could affect the entire qualification." He turned toward the equipment area. "Specialist Reynolds, please examine Lieutenant Carter's rifle. There seems to be an issue with the scope calibration." Emma felt every eye on the range turn toward her as she approached. She took the rifle from Carter with professional courtesy, though she could feel his skepticism as he released the weapon. "The problem appears to be with the elevation adjustment," Carter explained condescendingly. "It's drifting high and left at extended range." Emma nodded and began examining the weapon. She checked the scope mounts for proper torque, verified that the barrel was clean and undamaged, and confirmed that all mechanical systems were functioning correctly. As expected, she found nothing wrong with the rifle itself. "Excuse me, Lieutenant," she said quietly, "but the scope calibration is correct according to standard Army specifications. The mount torque is precisely to manufacturer recommendations at 65 inch-pounds. The issue may be environmental or technique related." A few of the snipers chuckled at what they perceived as presumption from support personnel. Carter's face darkened with embarrassment and anger. "I think I know my own rifle better than someone who just cleans them," he snapped. Emma felt 8 years of frustration and suppressed confidence surge to the surface. "With respect, sir, I've maintained this rifle for 2 years. I know its capabilities better than anyone here. At 1,000 yards in these conditions, this weapon should group within 2 inches. The limitation isn't mechanical." The range fell silent. Even Colonel Harrington turned to observe the unprecedented exchange between the elite sniper and the quiet maintenance specialist. Carter's face flushed red. "Is that so?" he demanded. "And I suppose you think you could do better?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Emma realized that this was the moment she had been unconsciously preparing for during 8 years of invisible service. Every weapon she had maintained, every scope she had calibrated, every technical detail she had mastered had led to this single moment of confrontation. "Yes," Emma said simply, "I do." Carter's laugh was harsh and mocking. "This should be entertaining. The weapons cleaner thinks she can outshoot trained snipers." He looked around at his unit, seeking support for his ridicule. Most of the men were grinning, anticipating what they assumed would be an embarrassing demonstration of civilian overconfidence. But Colonel Harrington stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. "Specialist Reynolds, are you qualified on the M24 system?" "Yes, sir," Emma replied. "I maintain qualification on all systems I service. Regulations require annual testing." "And what's your best recorded score?" Emma hesitated, knowing that her next words would either validate her bold claim or expose her to humiliation. "Perfect score at 1,000 yards, sir. Achieved during my last qualification cycle." Another moment of silence, then Carter's derisive snort. "Paper targets at a controlled range are different from real conditions. Anyone can get lucky once." "Then let's make it interesting," Emma said, surprising herself with her boldness. "Same conditions you just shot under. Same target, same distance. If I can't match your best score from this session, I'll publicly apologize for questioning your assessment of the equipment." Carter's smirk widened. "And when you fail?" "When I exceed your performance," Emma countered, "you publicly acknowledge that maintenance specialists deserve the same respect as any other military personnel." The challenge was set. Carter had backed himself into a corner where declining would look like cowardice while accepting risked his reputation against someone he had already dismissed as inferior. Colonel Harrington looked between them, recognizing that this confrontation had moved beyond simple disagreement into something that would affect unit morale regardless of outcome. Very well, he decided. One shot each at 1,000 yards. Standard target scoring. Specialist Reynolds, you'll use Sergeant Carter's rifle since you're familiar with its calibration. Emma nodded and approached the firing line, her hands steady despite the magnitude of what she had just committed herself to. Behind her, she could hear the murmurs of soldiers gathering to witness what many expected to be a spectacular failure by the quiet woman who had dared to challenge their unit's star performer. As she settled behind Carter's rifle, Emma felt a strange calm descend over her. The nervousness and doubt faded, replaced by absolute focus. This was what her grandfather had trained her for, not just the technical aspects of shooting, but the mental discipline to perform under pressure when everything was on the line. "Take your time, Specialist," Colonel Harrington said formally. "Standard qualification rules apply. One shot scored on impact." Emma nodded and began her preparation ritual. First, she checked the rifle's safety and chambered around with practiced efficiency. Then she settled into her shooting position, not the textbook stance Carter had demonstrated, but the unconventional yet more stable position her grandfather had taught her, one that better accommodated her smaller frame while maximizing control. She pressed her cheek against the stock and peered through the scope, immediately noting details that Carter had missed during his attempts. The mirage patterns rising from the sun-heated ground indicated a subtle thermal updraft that would affect bullet trajectory. The grass at the target area showed the faintest movement, suggesting a crosswind so gentle it wouldn't register on the range flags, but would still influence a projectile over 1,000 yards. Emma's breathing slowed to the deep, controlled rhythm she had perfected through years of practice. She could hear her heartbeat in her ears, timing her shot preparation to occur during the natural pause between beats when her body achieved perfect stillness. Through the scope, the target appeared crisp and clear. Emma made microscopic adjustments to her aim, compensating for the environmental factors she had observed. Her finger found the trigger and applied just enough pressure to remove the slack without firing a technique called staging that most recreational shooters never mastered. The moment arrived between one heartbeat and the next. Emma's world narrowed to the precise intersection of crosshairs and target. Her breathing stopped, her muscles relaxed into perfect stability, and she pressed the trigger straight back with the smooth, consistent pressure her grandfather had drilled into her since childhood. The rifle bucked against her shoulder with familiar authority. The sound of the shot echoed across the range, followed immediately by the distinctive ping of a bullet striking the steel target stand at 1,000 yards. Emma remained in position, following through by keeping the rifle steady and maintaining sight picture until the bullet impact could be confirmed. Through her scope, she watched the spotting team raise their scoring paddle, a perfect 10. Dead center of the target. The range fell completely silent. Emma finally lifted her head from the scope and looked back at the gathered soldiers. Carter's smirk had vanished, replaced by an expression of shocked disbelief. Colonel Harrington was studying the spotting team's signals with raised eyebrows. "Target confirmed?" The range officer's voice crackled through the radio. "Perfect center hit. 10. Emma stood and engaged the rifle safety, then turned to face Carter. "Your turn, Lieutenant," she said quietly. Carter's face cycled through several emotions: surprise, embarrassment, and growing anger. He snatched the rifle from Emma's hands without thanks and took position at the firing line with jerky, aggressive movements that betrayed his rattled state. Unlike Emma's methodical preparation, Carter rushed through his setup, clearly feeling pressure from the perfect shot he had just witnessed. His usual confidence had been replaced by desperate determination to prove that Emma's success was merely luck. Carter settled behind the scope and fired almost immediately without taking time to read conditions or properly stabilize his position. The shot rang out, but this time there was no confirming ping from the target area. "Miss," came the radio confirmation. "No impact on target." A murmur rippled through the gathered soldiers. Carter chambered another round and fired again without permission, still rushing his technique. This shot scored a 6, hitting the outer edge of the target. "That's not fair," Carter protested, looking up from his rifle. "She got lucky with conditions. Let me take another shot." "The challenge was one shot each," Colonel Harrington reminded him firmly. "Specialist Reynolds scored a 10. You scored nothing on your official attempt and a 6 on your unauthorized second shot. The demonstration is complete." The gathered soldiers began talking in low, excited voices. Emma had not only matched Carter's best performance from the session, but had significantly exceeded it under the same conditions with the same equipment. Carter stood up, his face flushed with humiliation. "This doesn't prove anything," he said loudly. "Anyone can get lucky once. I've been shooting professionally for years." Emma met his gaze steadily. "Then perhaps we should make it more interesting," she said. "If this was just luck, it shouldn't be repeatable. Would you like to try a more challenging distance?" The words came out before Emma fully realized what she was suggesting, but once spoken, she committed to them completely. Carter had spent the morning dismissing her expertise and treating her like an inferior. Now she was offering him a chance to save face while simultaneously raising the stakes beyond anything he had demonstrated. Carter looked around at his unit, seeing the expectant faces of soldiers who had witnessed his public defeat by someone he had dismissed as a mere maintenance worker. His reputation was already damaged, but backing down now would make the humiliation complete. "What distance?" he asked through gritted teeth. Emma considered the range's capabilities in the current conditions. 1,000 yards, she said, with a different rifle, one you haven't personally used before. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The challenge had just intensified. Using an unfamiliar rifle would eliminate any question of special preparation or customization. Colonel Harrington stepped forward. "Specialist Reynolds, are you certain you want to escalate this demonstration?" Emma nodded. She had made similar shots during her private practice, but always alone without witnesses. Now she was proposing to demonstrate this level of marksmanship in front of Carter's entire unit and senior officers. "Same terms as before," she said. "One shot each. If I miss, I'll not only apologize, but also request transfer to a different unit so I won't interfere with your training again." Carter's eyes lit up at this addition. "And if you somehow make this impossible shot again," Emma looked directly at him, "then you acknowledge publicly that technical expertise deserves respect, regardless of job classification, and you never again dismiss support personnel as inferior to combat roles." The stakes had escalated beyond a simple shooting demonstration into a confrontation about military hierarchy and respect. Carter found himself trapped by his own arrogance, unable to back down without admitting that he had been wrong to dismiss Emma's capabilities. "Deal," Carter said, extending his hand with false confidence. Emma shook it firmly, sealing an agreement that would fundamentally change how she was perceived on the base, regardless of the outcome. Master Sergeant Brooks approached with another M24 rifle from the equipment cart. "This one was brought in for maintenance yesterday," he explained to Colonel Harrington. "It's fully functional, but hasn't been specifically calibrated for competition. Neither shooter has used it before." Harrington nodded his approval. "This maintains fairness. Who shoots first?" "I will," Carter volunteered quickly, eager to regain some advantage. As Brooks handed him the unfamiliar rifle, Emma watched Carter inspect it. His movements were more deliberate now, trying to compensate for his earlier rashness. He checked the scope mounts, tested the trigger pull, and examined the barrel for any obvious flaws. "Richer is clear for the second demonstration," the range officer announced. "Lieutenant Carter will fire first at the 1,000-yard target with the alternate rifle." Carter took his position, noticeably more careful in his preparation this time. He spent nearly 2 minutes adjusting his stance and studying conditions through the scope. The gathered crowd remained silent, the tension palpable as Carter prepared for redemption. When he finally fired, the shot seemed to hang in the air for an eternity before the radio crackled to life. "Hit. Score 8, 2 inches right of center." A respectable shot with an unfamiliar rifle at 1,000 yards. Carter rose from the firing position with renewed confidence, handing the rifle to Emma with a challenging smirk. "Not bad for a weapon I've never touched before," he said just loudly enough for the nearest soldiers to hear. "Let's see if lightning strikes twice for our maintenance specialist." Emma accepted the rifle, silently feeling its weight and balance. It was slightly heavier than Carter's competition weapon, with a trigger that required marginally more pressure. These small differences would be insignificant to most shooters, but could be the difference between success and failure at extreme ranges. As she settled into position, Emma was acutely aware that her future in the military hinged on the next few moments. She had committed herself, publicly drawn attention to skills she had kept hidden for years, and challenged a commissioned officer. If she failed now, her career would never recover. Instead of allowing these thoughts to increase her anxiety, Emma channeled them into heightened focus. She recalled her grandfather's words, "Pressure is a privilege. It means you're doing something that matters." The range fell silent as Emma began her preparation routine. Unlike her first shot, where she had the advantage of intimately knowing Carter's rifle, this time she needed to rapidly assess an unfamiliar weapon. She carefully checked the scope settings, tested the trigger breakpoint, and confirmed the rifle's overall condition. Emma then turned her attention to environmental factors. In the minutes since her first shot, conditions had subtly changed. The sun had risen higher, increasing thermal effects. A barely perceptible breeze had developed from the east, so slight that the range flag still hung motionless, but enough to influence a bullet's path over 1,000 yards. Through the scope, Emma studied the heat mirage rising from the ground, reading its patterns to calculate air density variations along the bullet's path. She made mental adjustments to her aim point, compensating for both the rifle's unique characteristics and the environmental conditions. Taking a deep breath, Emma began her final shooting sequence. She exhaled halfway, found her natural respiratory pause, and focused on the space between heartbeats that her grandfather had taught her to recognize. In that moment of perfect stillness, Emma squeezed the trigger with smooth, consistent pressure. The rifle's report echoed across the range. Emma maintained her cheek weld against the stock, keeping the target in view through the scope as the bullet traveled toward its destination. For a breathless second, nothing happened. Then came the distinctive ping of lead striking steel. "Hit!" the range officer's voice announced through the radio. "Score 10! Dead center!" The spectators erupted in astonished conversation. Emma had just accomplished something that defied statistical probability: two perfect shots at 1,000 yards with two different rifles under field conditions. As Emma rose from the firing position, she saw Colonel Harrington studying her with intense interest. Master Sergeant Brooks stood nearby, a barely concealed smile of satisfaction on his weathered face. And Lieutenant Carter stood frozen, his expression a complex mixture of disbelief, anger, and dawning realization that he had severely underestimated the quiet maintenance specialist. "That concludes the demonstration," Colonel Harrington announced, his voice cutting through the excited chatter. "Lieutenant Carter, I believe you have something to say to Specialist Reynolds." Carter struggled visibly with his pride before finally managing to speak. "Specialist Reynolds," he said stiffly, "your shooting skill is impressive. I acknowledge that technical personnel deserve proper respect for their contributions." It wasn't the most gracious concession, but it represented a significant shift from his earlier dismissive attitude. More importantly, every soldier present had witnessed Emma's extraordinary demonstration and would carry that knowledge throughout the base. As the crowd began to disperse, several soldiers approached Emma with congratulations and questions about her background. For the first time in her military career, she found herself the center of positive attention based on her professional abilities rather than being invisible support staff. Colonel Harrington made his way through the dissipating crowd to where Emma stood. "Specialist Reynolds, I'd like a word in private," he said, gesturing toward a nearby equipment shelter. Emma followed, aware that her impromptu demonstration had captured the colonel's attention in ways she hadn't anticipated. Inside the shelter, Harrington turned to face her. "That was the most impressive display of marksmanship I've witnessed in 30 years of military service," he said without preamble. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" "My grandfather taught me, sir," Emma replied. "Master Sergeant James Reynolds, Special Forces." Harrington's eyebrows rose in recognition. "James Reynolds," he repeated. "I knew him by reputation. One of the best Cold War operators we ever had. His work during operations in Eastern Europe and Afghanistan in the 80s is still classified, but legendary among those with the clearance to know." Emma nodded, surprised by the colonel's familiarity with her grandfather's service. "And now I see his granddaughter has inherited more than just his name," Harrington continued. "What you demonstrated today goes beyond mere skill. It shows an intuitive understanding of ballistics and environmental factors that can't be taught from a manual." "Thank you, sir." "What's your career goal, Specialist Reynolds? Clearly you're not fulfilling your potential in weapons maintenance." Emma hesitated, unsure how candid she should be. "When I enlisted, I wanted to become a sniper, sir. But that path wasn't available to women when I joined." Harrington nodded thoughtfully. "Things are changing, albeit slowly. Combat roles are opening to women who can meet the standards." He paused, studying her with calculation. "I'm developing a new concept for the Army, an integrated sniper unit that combines exceptional marksmanship with technical expertise. Specialists who can not only make impossible shots, but also understand their weapons at an engineering level." Emma's pulse quickened. That sounds like an ideal combination, sir. It is, but finding personnel with both skill sets has been challenging. Most snipers understand their weapons as tools, but lack deeper technical knowledge. Most technical specialists understand the mechanics but lack field application skills. Harrington smiled slightly. Until today, I wasn't sure such individuals existed outside theoretical planning documents. The implications of his words were clear, but Emma waited for him to continue. I'm establishing a training program at Fort Garrison in Georgia. 6 months of intensive evaluation combining marksmanship, weapons technology, and operational tactics. It's highly selective. We're only taking 12 candidates for the initial cycle, and the washout rate is expected to be significant. Are you offering me a position, sir? Emma asked, barely believing the turn her day had taken. I'm offering you an opportunity to be evaluated, Harrington clarified. What happens after that depends entirely on your performance. It would mean leaving your current position, potentially facing significant challenges, and competing against combat-experienced soldiers who may resent your presence. Emma considered his words carefully. This was the chance she had wanted since enlisting a path to using her inherited talent in service to her country, just as she had promised her grandfather. When would this evaluation begin, sir? 2 weeks from today. Just enough time to process the transfer paperwork and for you to settle your affairs here. Emma nodded decisively. I would be honored to participate, Colonel. Excellent, Harrington replied. Master Sergeant Brooks will handle the administrative details. I'll expect you at Fort Garrison on the 15th. He extended his hand, which Emma shook firmly. Prepare yourself, specialist. What you experienced today was just a taste of the scrutiny and pressure you'll face in this program. As Colonel Harrington departed, Master Sergeant Brooks entered the shelter, his expression unreadable. So, he said after a moment, you're heading to Fort Garrison. It appears so, Sergeant. Brooks nodded slowly. You've opened a door that's been closed to you for 8 years. That's the good news. He paused, his expression growing serious. The bad news is that you've also painted a target on your back. What happened here today will spread across the base before dinner. Some people won't like it. Emma understood his concern. Military culture could be resistant to change, and she had just disrupted established hierarchies by demonstrating superior skills from a support position. I can handle myself, Sergeant. I know you can, Brooks replied, but keep your eyes open. Success makes enemies faster than failure ever does. Brooks's warning proved prescient. Word of Emma's marksmanship demonstration spread through Fort Braxton like wildfire. By evening, mess soldiers from units across the base were discussing the maintenance specialist who had outshot the base's premier sniper at 1,000 yards twice. The reactions were mixed. Some soldiers, particularly those who had witnessed the event firsthand, spoke with admiration for her skill. Others, especially those loyal to Lieutenant Carter, dismissed it as a fluke or suggested some form of cheating must have occurred. The following morning, Emma arrived at the armory to find her workstation in disarray. Someone had scattered gun oil across her meticulously organized tool collection and left a crude note reading, "Stay in your lane, wrench monkey." Emma cleaned up the mess without reporting it, understanding that complaining would only reinforce stereotypes about female soldiers being unable to handle confrontation. Instead, she implemented additional security measures for her workspace and continued her duties with the same professional precision she had always maintained. 3 days after the range demonstration, Emma was cleaning a batch of M4 carbines when Lieutenant Carter entered the armory. She hadn't seen him since their confrontation, and tension filled the room as he approached her workbench. Specialist Reynolds, he said formally, his voice carefully neutral. Lieutenant Carter, Emma replied, continuing her work. Carter stood silently for a moment as if struggling with what to say next. I wanted to speak with you privately about what happened at the range. Emma set down her tools and gave him her full attention. Yes, sir. Your shooting was exceptional. Carter admitted the words seemingly difficult for him to speak. I've been doing this professionally for 6 years. I've won competitions, set base records, and trained dozens of soldiers, but I've never seen shooting like yours under those conditions. Emma remained silent, allowing him to continue. I talked to some of the senior NCOs about your background, Carter said. They remember you from basic training. Your marksmanship scores were off the charts even then, but you were quiet and didn't push for combat assignments. Emma nodded. I was told those roles weren't available to women when I enlisted. I accepted what was offered. Carter shook his head. That's the Army's loss. We've been wasting your abilities for 8 years because we didn't look beyond job classifications to identify talent. He paused. I wanted you to know that I spoke with Colonel Harrington after you left. I told him you were exactly the kind of person he's been looking for. This admission surprised Emma. You recommended me for the program. I did, Carter confirmed. I might be arrogant in Reynolds, but I'm not stupid. What I saw yesterday was genuine expertise. The Army needs that regardless of where it comes from. Emma studied his face, trying to determine his sincerity. Thank you, Lieutenant. Carter nodded once. Good luck at Fort Garrison. You'll need it. The program Harrington is developing isn't just about shooting. It's about creating a new kind of operator who understands both the tactical and technical aspects of precision warfare. As Carter turned to leave, he added, and Reynolds, when you get there, remember that proving yourself once isn't enough. In elite units, you have to prove yourself every single day. With those parting words, Carter left the armory, leaving Emma to reflect on how dramatically relationships had shifted since her range demonstration. People who had previously ignored her now sought her out for conversation. Soldiers who had never considered her opinions now asked for her thoughts on weapon systems and shooting techniques. The 2 weeks before her departure passed quickly. Emma spent her days transferring her maintenance responsibilities to other technicians and her evenings preparing physically and mentally for the challenges ahead. She increased her running distance, added strength training to her routine, and studied tactical manuals that would be relevant to the Fort Garrison program. Master Sergeant Brooks provided guidance based on his Special Forces background, offering insights into the selection process for elite units and the mindset required to succeed in high-pressure environments. Technical skill and marksmanship will get you in the door, Brooks advised during one evening session at the base gym. But what keeps you in these programs is mental toughness and adaptability. They're going to push you beyond your limits, then keep pushing to see if you break. Emma nodded, adding another plate to the barbell for her squat routine. My grandfather used to say that the mind gives out long before the body does. Smart man, Brooks replied. Remember that when you're sleep-deprived, hungry, cold, and being screamed at by instructors who want you to quit, because that's exactly what you're signing up for. On her final evening at Fort Braxton, Emma sat alone in her quarters cleaning her grandfather's Remington 700. The familiar ritual helped her think through the complex decision ahead. She was leaving the security of a position she had mastered for the uncertainty of a program where failure was not only possible but likely based on Harrington's comments about the expected washout rate. A knock at her door interrupted her contemplation. Emma opened it to find Sergeant Rebecca Wilson, one of the few other women in her unit, and someone she had always respected for her straightforward approach to military service. Mind if I come in? Rebecca asked. I wanted to talk about what happened at the range. Emma invited her in and offered coffee from her small personal supply. Rebecca settled into the room's single chair, while Emma remained standing still, processing the upcoming transition. That was some impressive shooting, Rebecca began, but I'm guessing it's complicated your life considerably. Emma nodded. More than I expected. I thought I was just defending my technical work, but apparently I started something bigger. Rebecca smiled knowingly. You challenged more than Carter's ego. You challenged assumptions about what support personnel are capable of achieving. Some people don't handle that well. Colonel Harrington mentioned there's been tension in Carter's unit. Carter's been telling anyone who will listen that your shot was luck and that support staff are getting above their station, Rebecca confirmed. But not everyone believes him. Some of the soldiers who witnessed your demonstration are asking why the military doesn't do more to identify and develop hidden talents. This perspective hadn't occurred to Emma. She had focused on her personal situation without considering the broader implications for other soldiers whose abilities might be overlooked due to their assignments or personalities. What would you do? Emma asked. Rebecca considered the question carefully. 8 years ago, when I enlisted, I wanted to be a helicopter pilot, but I was assigned to communications instead because my test scores indicated technical aptitude. I never pursued the pilot training because I convinced myself that communications was important work and I shouldn't be ambitious. Emma recognized the parallel to her own experience. But watching you take that shot made me realize I've been limiting myself, Rebecca continued. You didn't accept that your assignment defined your capabilities. Maybe it's time I stopped accepting mine. Emma felt a sense of responsibility she hadn't anticipated. Her demonstration hadn't just affected her own career. It had inspired other soldiers to reconsider their own limitations and possibilities. Fort Garrison sounds like an incredible opportunity, Rebecca observed, but it also sounds terrifying. Are you ready to compete with soldiers who've never doubted they belonged in combat roles? Emma had been asking herself the same question. Her technical expertise was unquestionable, and her shooting ability was clearly exceptional. But combat roles required confidence and assertiveness that she had never needed to develop in maintenance work. I've spent 8 years being invisible, Emma admitted. Part of me thinks that was easier than proving myself repeatedly in a more challenging environment. Rebecca laughed. Too late for invisible now. Half the base knows who you are and what you can do. The question is whether you're going to use that recognition to push yourself further or let it intimidate you into playing it safe. Their conversation was interrupted by another knock at the door. Emma opened it to find Master Sergeant Brooks. Specialist Reynolds, Brooks said formally. I apologize for the late hour, but I wanted to speak with you before tomorrow's departure. Emma invited him in, wondering if he was about to deliver last-minute advice or warnings about the Fort Garrison program. I've been in the military for 22 years, Brooks began after Rebecca excused herself. And I've seen exceptional soldiers held back by their own assumptions about what they are capable of achieving. I've also seen mediocre soldiers promoted beyond their abilities because they were confident and vocal about their ambitions. Emma listened carefully, unsure where this conversation was heading. Your shooting demonstration reminded me why I joined the military in the first place, Brooks continued. I wanted to serve my country using my best abilities, not just the abilities that happened to match my initial assignment. Emma realized that her actions had affected people throughout the base hierarchy, inspiring questions about talent development and career progression that extended far beyond her individual situation. The Fort Garrison program represents everything you've earned through years of dedicated service and exceptional skill development, Brooks said firmly. But more importantly, accepting that challenge would demonstrate to every soldier on this base that excellence can come from unexpected places and that assignments don't have to define limitations. As Brooks left that evening, Emma found herself viewing her decision differently. This wasn't just about her personal career advancement. It was about proving that the military could recognize and develop talent regardless of where it initially appeared. She spent the night considering not just what she wanted for herself, but what her choice would mean for other soldiers who might be limiting themselves based on their current roles or their quiet personalities. By morning, Emma's determination had solidified into unshakable resolve. She would succeed at Fort Garrison not only for herself and her grandfather's legacy, but for every overlooked soldier whose talents remained hidden in support roles across the military. The morning of her departure arrived with military precision. Emma reported to the transportation office at 0500 hours for her flight to Georgia, carrying only a single duffel bag and her grandfather's journal. As the transport vehicle pulled away from Fort Braxton, she watched the base her home for 8 years disappear in the distance, knowing that regardless of the outcome at Fort Garrison, she would never return as the same person who was leaving today. Fort Garrison's advanced marksman training facility was unlike anything Emma had experienced. The buildings were modern and purpose-built for training elite shooters with multiple rifle ranges extending to distances exceeding 1,200 yards. Electronic scoring systems and environmental monitoring equipment surpassed civilian competition facilities and even Fort Braxton's advanced range. Emma joined 11 other soldiers for the evaluation program, immediately noticing that she was the only woman and the only participant from a support role. The others were infantry soldiers, current snipers seeking advanced training, or special operations personnel looking to add marksmanship specialties to their skill sets. The program director, Master Sergeant Frank Miller, addressed the group with crisp professionalism. At 61, Miller was a legend in military marksmanship, circles a former Delta Force operator with experience dating back to operations in Panama. His silver hair was cropped short, and a scar ran from his right temple to his jaw, a souvenir from close quarters combat decades earlier. Welcome to the Integrated Sniper Unit Evaluation Program. Miller began, his voice carrying the gravelly quality of someone who had spent years issuing commands in combat zones. Each of you is here because someone believes you have the potential to become part of a new breed of military specialist, one who combines exceptional marksmanship with technical expertise. Miller paced slowly in front of the assembled soldiers, studying each face with penetrating intensity. This evaluation will determine which of you possess the technical skills, mental discipline, and leadership potential required for advanced sniper roles. Approximately half of you will successfully complete the program. Emma felt her stomach tighten at the 50% failure rate, but she reminded herself that she had already demonstrated exceptional shooting ability under pressure. Your backgrounds vary significantly, Miller continued, but here your previous assignments are irrelevant. You'll be evaluated solely on your performance in marksmanship, fieldcraft, physical fitness, and leadership exercises. Miller's gaze lingered on Emma for a moment longer than the others. Some of you came to this program through traditional paths. Others have taken more unconventional routes. I don't care how you got here. I care what you do now that you are here. The first week focused on establishing baseline abilities. Emma quickly realized that her technical knowledge of weapon systems exceeded that of most participants, including soldiers with years of combat experience. Her maintenance background had provided her with detailed understanding of ballistics, environmental effects, and equipment capabilities that purely operational soldiers had never needed to develop. During the first technical evaluation, the candidates were tasked with diagnosing and correcting malfunctions in various sniper rifle systems under time constraints. Emma completed the exercise in half the allocated time, identifying issues that several combat-experienced snipers missed entirely. Reynolds has an unfair advantage, one Army Ranger complained, after Emma diagnosed a subtle headspace issue in an M110 that had stumped him for 20 minutes. She's been working on these systems for years. Master Sergeant Miller overheard the comment and addressed it immediately. There are no unfair advantages in combat, Sergeant Martinez. There is only prepared and unprepared. If Specialist Reynolds took the time to master technical aspects that you ignored, that's not her problem, it's yours. However, the physical fitness requirements proved more challenging for Emma. While she maintained adequate fitness for her previous duties, the advanced program demanded endurance and strength levels she had never needed to achieve. The daily physical training sessions left her exhausted and struggling to keep pace with soldiers whose combat roles had maintained them at peak fitness levels. During a 12-mile ruck march with 70-pound packs, Emma fell behind the main group. Her lungs burned and her legs trembled with fatigue as she pushed herself beyond previous limits. Just as she began to doubt her ability to finish, Master Sergeant Miller appeared beside her. "Your grandfather was a tough son of a bitch," Miller said conversationally, matching her pace. "I worked with him in Afghanistan in '87. Soviet Special Forces had us pinned down outside Jalalabad. James made a shot at just over 100 yards that saved our entire team." Emma was surprised by the personal connection. "You knew my grandfather?" Miller nodded. "He was the best I ever saw. Not just because he could shoot, but because he understood exactly what happened between the moment a round left the barrel and the moment it hit the target. That's rare." Emma pressed on, drawing strength from the unexpected connection to her grandfather's legacy. "He ever tell you his secret?" Miller asked. "He had many, Emma replied, adjusting her pack straps to redistribute the crushing weight. Miller smiled slightly. "He told me once that the body can be trained to do almost anything. But the mind of a true marksman, that's something you were born with. You either have it or you don't." "Do you think I have it?" Emma asked, surprised by her own boldness. Miller studied her for a moment before answering. "You've got his eyes, that same way of seeing things others miss." He paused. "But what matters is whether you've got his heart. Because when you're exhausted, when your muscles are screaming, when everyone else has given up, that's when you find out what you're really made of." With those words, Miller increased his pace and moved ahead, leaving Emma to finish the march alone. She pushed through the pain, drawing on reserves she hadn't known she possessed, and completed the course not first but not last either. The leadership exercises revealed Emma's greatest weakness. She had spent 8 years working independently, making technical decisions without needing to coordinate with others or explain her reasoning. Now she was required to lead teams, communicate effectively under stress, and make tactical decisions that affected group success. During one particularly challenging exercise, Emma's team failed to achieve their objective because she had focused on technical precision rather than overall mission coordination. Her individual shooting performance was flawless, but her inability to effectively direct her teammates' efforts resulted in group failure. That evening, Master Sergeant Miller approached her privately as she cleaned her rifle in the barracks. "Reynolds, your technical skills are exceptional, and your shooting ability is among the best I've seen. But leadership isn't about individual excellence. It's about enabling group success." Emma nodded, understanding that her greatest challenge wasn't mastering new shooting techniques, but developing interpersonal skills she had actively avoided for years. "I'm not giving up, Master Sergeant," she said firmly. "I know I have weaknesses to address, but I'm committed to developing whatever skills are necessary." Miller studied her with approval. "That's exactly the attitude we're looking for. Technical ability can only take you so far. Adaptability and determination are what separates successful snipers from exceptional marksmen." As the first month of training progressed, Emma began to find her footing. She still struggled with the physical demands, but improved steadily. Her technical knowledge continued to impress instructors and gradually earned the respect of her fellow candidates, most of them anyway. Staff Sergeant James Dixon, a decorated Army Ranger with 3 combat deployments, remained openly skeptical of Emma's presence in the program. During team exercises, he frequently questioned her decisions and made thinly veiled comments about maintenance personnel playing soldier. The tension came to a head during a night firing exercise in the 4th week. The candidates were tasked with engaging targets at varying distances using night vision equipment. Emma had completed her rotation successfully when Dixon approached as she was securing her rifle. "Not bad for someone who spent her career in an air-conditioned armory," he said, just loudly enough for nearby candidates to hear. Emma continued her equipment checks without responding, following her grandfather's advice to avoid unnecessary confrontations. "I wonder what kind of special treatment gets a maintenance specialist into a program meant for actual combat soldiers," Dixon continued. "Must be nice having Colonel Harrington as a personal advocate." Emma finally looked up. "The same special treatment that gets anyone here, Sergeant Dixon, meeting the standards and demonstrating the required skills." Dixon stepped closer. "The battlefield isn't a shooting range with perfect conditions, Reynolds. Out there, people are trying to kill you while you're making your fancy shots. Support personnel like you have no business in combat roles." Before Emma could respond, Master Sergeant Miller's voice cut through the darkness. "Interesting theory, Sergeant Dixon. Care to test it?" Dixon turned, surprised by Miller's silent approach. "Sir, tomorrow morning 0600, you and Reynolds will run the combat stress course together. Let's see how your combat experience stacks up against her technical expertise when the pressure is real." The combat stress course was notorious, a grueling combination of physical obstacles, decision-making challenges, and precision shooting under simulated battlefield conditions. Candidates typically ran it in the final weeks of the program after building up to its demands. "With respect, sir," Dixon began. "Reynolds hasn't had the tactical training to our 600, Sergeant," Miller interrupted. "Unless you'd prefer to withdraw your concerns about Specialist Reynolds' qualifications." Dixon's jaw tightened. 0600 it is, sir." As Miller walked away, Emma realized she had just been thrust into a direct competition that could determine her future in the program. Dixon had 3 combat tours and years of tactical training. She had technical knowledge and natural shooting ability, but limited experience with the combat simulation elements of the course. That night, Emma barely slept. Instead, she studied course diagrams, reviewed tactical decision-making protocols, and mentally prepared for what would likely be the most challenging test of her military career. Her grandfather's journal provided some guidance on performing under extreme stress, but nothing could fully prepare her for what awaited at dawn. The combat stress course began with a 2-mile run in full tactical gear, immediately followed by a series of obstacles designed to elevate heart rates and induce physical fatigue. Participants then entered a shoot house with moving targets, requiring split-second friend or foe identification. The course culminated in a long-range shooting stage where candidates engaged targets from 400 to 800 yards, while instructors created various distractions from simulated incoming fire to blaring sirens and shouted contradictory commands. At precisely 0600, Emma and Dixon stood at the starting line, both dressed in full combat gear, including plate carriers that added 30 pounds to their frames. A small crowd had gathered other candidates, curious to see how the maintenance specialist would fare against the experienced ranger. Course rules are simple, Miller announced. Complete all stations as quickly and accurately as possible. Shooting penalties add 2 minutes to your time. Physical obstacles must be completed correctly or repeated. First one to finish the final firing stage wins. Emma glanced at Dixon, who stared straight ahead, his expression one of grim determination. This wasn't just a training exercise for him, it was a defense of what he perceived as the proper military order, with combat soldiers at the top of the hierarchy and support personnel in their place below. Begin, Miller shouted, starting the timer. Emma and Dixon exploded from the starting line, their different approaches immediately apparent. Dixon, with his combat experience, set an aggressive pace designed to establish an early lead. Emma, recognizing her limitations, maintained a steady rhythm that would preserve energy for later stages. By the first mile marker, Dixon had opened a 30-second lead. His powerful stride and combat-conditioned body moved efficiently despite the heavy gear. Behind him, Emma focused on her breathing, finding the optimal pattern for endurance, 2 counts in 3 counts out. Reynolds is already falling behind, one candidate remarked to Master Sergeant Miller as they watched from an observation point. Miller's weathered face remained impassive. The course isn't won in the first mile. As they approached the obstacle course, Dixon's lead had grown to nearly 45 seconds. He attacked the obstacles with practiced efficiency, scaling walls, navigating barbed wire crawls, and swinging across water pits with the confidence of someone who had done it countless times before. Emma approached each obstacle differently. Rather than matching Dixon's aggressive style, she methodically analyzed each challenge before attempting it. Where Dixon relied on raw strength, Emma used technique and leverage. She remembered lessons from basic training on the rope climb, using her legs to clamp the rope and conserve upper body strength. At the 12-foot wall, she utilized footholds that Dixon had ignored in favor of an arm-intensive pull-up technique. By the end of the obstacle course, Dixon's lead had shrunk to 30 seconds. Both candidates approached the shoot house breathing heavily, a structure designed to test target identification and close-quarters marksmanship. Inside the dim interior, Dixon moved quickly, engaging targets with precision, born from multiple combat tours. His weapon transitions were smooth, his footwork practiced. Yet in his haste to maintain his lead, he misidentified 2 targets, shooting a civilian figure and hesitating too long on an enemy target. When Emma entered the shoot house, she took a fundamentally different approach. Where Dixon had moved fast and relied on combat instinct, Emma methodically cleared each room with technical precision. Her weapon handling was flawless, each movement economical and purpose-driven. Most importantly, she correctly identified every target, incurring no penalties. 4 minutes of penalties for Dixon, announced the range officer. No penalties for Reynolds. Dixon's face darkened as he realized his lead had evaporated. He now stood shoulder to shoulder with Emma at the entrance to the final stage, the long-range shooting course where both candidates would engage targets under stress conditions. "This is where it matters," Dixon muttered, loud enough for Emma to hear. "Let's see how you perform when it's not a perfect day on the range." The long-range course consisted of 5 firing positions with targets at increasing distances. Between each position, candidates needed to sprint 50 yards, carrying their rifle and equipment. To add stress, instructors had prepared various distractions, flashing lights, loud noises, and physical obstacles that appeared without warning. "Final stage rules," Miller explained as they moved to the first position. 5 targets, 5 positions. Confirmed hit before moving to the next. Each miss adds 30 seconds. Begin when ready. Dixon took the left lane, Emma the right. Both dropped into prone positions at the 400-yard mark. Dixon fired first to hit, but not center mass. He immediately sprinted to the next position. Emma took 3 seconds longer, controlling her breathing before squeezing the trigger. Her round struck dead center. At the 500-yard position, instructors activated bright flashing lights directly in the candidate's field of view. Dixon, momentarily distracted, missed his first shot before connecting with his second. Emma, focusing beyond the flashes, delivered another center mass hit on her first attempt. As they progressed through the course, the gap between them widened. At 600 yards, instructors blasted sirens and shouted contradictory commands. Dixon rushed his shot and missed twice. Emma maintained her focus and delivered another first-round hit. At 700 yards, instructors doused both firing positions with water, creating muddy conditions. Dixon struggled to find a stable position. Emma removed her outer tactical vest to create a more stable platform in the mud, a technique not taught in standard military training, but one she had developed during civilian practice sessions. The final position at 800 yards combined all previous challenges, flashing lights, sirens, and smoke grenades that obscured the targets. Additionally, the instructors had subtly altered both rifles, creating mechanical issues that would affect accuracy. Dixon reached the position first despite his shooting penalties, but immediately struggled with his modified rifle. The trigger pull felt different, heavier than before. He fired twice, missing both times before recognizing something had changed. When Emma arrived, she immediately noticed the alteration to her rifle. The scope's elevation adjustment had been modified. Instead of trying to fix it, she quickly calculated the necessary adjustments in her head and compensated with her aim point. Through swirling smoke and blaring sirens, Emma found her position, controlled her breathing, and squeezed the trigger with deliberate pressure. The target indicator flashed a perfect hit at 800 yards with a compromised rifle under extreme conditions. Dixon finally connected on his fourth attempt. He rose from his position, face flushed with exertion and humiliation. "Course complete," announced Master Sergeant Miller. Final times including penalties. Staff Sergeant Dixon, 32 minutes, 17 seconds. Specialist Reynolds, 29 minutes, 43 seconds. The gathered candidates fell silent. Dixon had entered the course with years of combat experience and elite training. Emma had entered with technical knowledge and natural shooting ability. Against all expectations, the maintenance specialist had outperformed the experienced ranger. Dixon secured his rifle without a word and walked toward the barracks. The message was clear to everyone. Watching technical expertise, combined with natural shooting talent, could indeed overcome combat experience when it came to performing under pressure. Master Sergeant Miller approached Emma as she cleaned mud from her rifle. "Your grandfather would have been proud of that performance, Reynolds." "Thank you, sir," Emma replied, focusing on her weapon. "But Dixon is still a better tactical operator than I am." Miller shook his head. "That wasn't luck, Reynolds. What Dixon and some others here don't understand is that technical knowledge isn't just about maintaining weapons. It's about understanding systems well enough to adapt when they fail. You didn't just outshoot Dixon today, you outthought him." As Emma walked back to her quarters, several candidates approached to congratulate her. The atmosphere had shifted noticeably. Where before she had been viewed as an outsider, now she had earned genuine respect. Over dinner that evening, Emma sat alone reviewing her performance and identifying areas for improvement. She was surprised when Dixon appeared across from her, tray in hand. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his expression neutral. Emma gestured to the empty seat. For several minutes they ate in awkward silence. "I've been thinking about your approach today," Dixon finally said. "You didn't try to match my tactics. You found your own way through the course." Emma nodded. "I can't compete with your combat experience, so I had to leverage what I do know." Dixon studied her for a moment. "That's what I don't get. Most people in your position would try to prove they can do everything exactly like combat soldiers do it. But you're not trying to be a traditional soldier, you're bringing something different." "Is that good or bad?" Emma asked. "It's unexpected," Dixon admitted, "but effective." "Where did you learn to adapt like that?" Emma hesitated, then said, "Growing up, my grandfather taught me that understanding the principles behind systems matters more than memorizing procedures. He said procedures work until they don't, but principles always apply." Dixon nodded thoughtfully. "My first deployment, our unit got pinned down outside Fallujah. Standard procedure wasn't working. Our technical specialist modified our comms equipment on the fly, rigged up a remote detonator from spare parts. Saved our asses." He paused. "I never gave that guy enough credit." It wasn't an apology, but Emma recognized it as an olive branch, the beginning of mutual respect that might eventually lead to effective teamwork. As training continued into its third month, Emma's relationship with Dixon and the other candidates evolved. Dixon maintained a professional distance, but the open antagonism was gone. During team exercises, he began to defer to her technical expertise, while she increasingly relied on his tactical knowledge. "You two are developing an interesting dynamic," Miller observed after a particularly successful exercise. "Dixon handles movement and security, you manage technical aspects and precision fire. It's complementary." Emma's technical prowess continued to impress, but leadership remained her weakness. During a simulated hostage rescue, she froze when required to make rapid decisions with incomplete information. Her hesitation resulted in a failed mission and simulated casualties. That evening, Emma practiced alone at the range, frustrated by her performance. Miller found her there after hours. "Your shooting isn't what needs work," he observed, settling onto the bench beside her. "Today's exercise failed because you couldn't commit when seconds mattered." Emma lowered her rifle. "I knew the potential options, but I couldn't risk my team on a plan I wasn't certain would succeed." "In combat, you're never certain," Miller replied. "You make the best decision you can with the information available, then commit to it completely. Hesitation kills more effectively than enemy fire." "It's different from technical work," Emma admitted. "With maintenance, you either fix the problem correctly or you don't. There's usually a right answer." "Leadership isn't about finding right answers," Miller said. "It's about making decisions your team will follow even when the situation is uncertain." The conversation helped Emma understand the conceptual difference, but understanding wasn't enough. She needed practice. Over the next several weeks, Emma requested additional leadership scenarios, small exercises where she could practice decision-making under pressure without risking the entire program. Miller arranged for her to lead emergency response drills, equipment, failure scenarios, and small unit movements. She failed repeatedly but learned from each failure. The pattern became clear. Emma excelled when given time to analyze and plan, but struggled with rapid instinctive decisions. She began developing a personal system, a mental checklist she could run through quickly to structure her thinking in crisis situations. During a night navigation exercise, Emma's team became separated when unexpected weather moved in. Visibility dropped to near zero in heavy rain, and communications were intermittent. As team leader, Emma had seconds to decide whether to continue the mission or abort for safety. She ran through her mental checklist: mission objectives versus safety risks, team capabilities versus environmental challenges, alternative approaches versus time constraints. Within 30 seconds, she made her decision: modify the mission parameters to ensure team safety while still accomplishing critical objectives. "Pull back to checkpoint Bravo," she ordered through static-filled comms. "We'll establish a defensive position there, send one two-person element to complete the priority objective, and maintain the extraction schedule." The modified approach succeeded, with all team members returning safely and the primary mission objective accomplished. It wasn't perfect, but it represented significant progress in Emma's ability to make timely decisions under pressure. "You're starting to think like an operational leader," Miller noted during the debrief. "Not perfect, but effective. That's what matters." By the program's fourth month, the original 12 candidates had been reduced to 9 through voluntary withdrawals and performance-based eliminations. Emma Dixon and the remaining candidates formed a more cohesive group, their initial differences giving way to professional respect. As they progressed, the instructors introduced increasingly complex scenarios that combined technical challenges, tactical problems, and leadership decisions. These integrated exercises revealed how far Emma had come and how far she still had to go. During one particularly challenging simulation, Emma's team was tasked with infiltrating an enemy-held building to recover intelligence materials. The operation required precision, shooting technical expertise to bypass security systems, and tactical movement, a perfect test of the ISU concept. Emma led the planning phase, leveraging each team member's strengths. Dixon coordinated the infiltration route and security positions. Specialist Garcia handled communications and surveillance countermeasures. Private Chen prepared the extraction plan. The operation began flawlessly, with the team infiltrating the target building undetected. Emma successfully neutralized 2 sentries with precision shots from a suppressed rifle. Dixon led the room-clearing element with practiced efficiency. Then, as they approached the objective, everything went wrong. The intelligence materials were secured in an unexpected storage system that none of their technical briefings had covered. As team leader, Emma had to adapt immediately. Garcia maintained perimeter security. Dixon extend our time window by creating a diversion at the south entrance. Chen assist me with this system, Emma ordered without hesitation. Working quickly, Emma analyzed the unfamiliar locking mechanism, identifying its core principles, rather than searching for a known procedure. Within minutes, she had bypassed the system using components from her field kit combined with materials found on site. "Impressive adaptation," Miller commented during the debrief. "6 months ago, you might have frozen when confronted with an unexpected technical challenge. while under leadership pressure. Today, you integrated both skill sets seamlessly. As the program entered its final month, the remaining candidates faced their ultimate test, a 72-hour field exercise designed to evaluate every aspect of their development. Only those who completed this final challenge would be considered for positions in the integrated sniper unit. 2 days before the exercise, Colonel Harrington arrived at Fort Garrison to observe the final preparations. He met with each candidate individually, assessing their progress and readiness. When Emma entered Harrington's temporary office, he studied her with evaluating eyes. "Master Sergeant Miller speaks highly of your performance, Reynolds." "Thank you, sir," Emma replied, standing at attention. "At ease," Harrington gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Your technical scores are exceptional, your marksmanship is outstanding, and your leadership capabilities have improved significantly. However," he continued, "there remains a question about your readiness for combat deployment." Emma waited for him to elaborate. "The integrated sniper unit isn't just about shooting targets on a range," Harrington explained. "It's about operating in hostile environments where technical failure, environmental challenges, and enemy action create conditions that can't be fully simulated in training." "I understand, sir," Emma replied. "I believe I have demonstrated my ability to adapt throughout this program." Harrington studied her for a moment. "What drives you, Reynolds? Why push yourself through this program when you had a secure, respected position in weapons maintenance?" The question caught Emma off guard. After considering her answer carefully, she replied, "I made a promise to my grandfather before he died, that I would use the abilities he taught me to serve with honor." She paused. "For 8 years, I accepted limitations that others placed on me. But that day on the range at Fort Braxton, I realized I had been limiting myself as well." Harrington nodded slowly. "Your grandfather was an exceptional soldier, one of the finest operators I ever encountered." He opened a folder on his desk. "What you may not know is that James Reynolds was part of a classified program during the Cold War, one that identified and deployed individuals with exceptional natural abilities, regardless of their military classification. The program was called Longshot," Harrington continued. "It paired technical specialists with combat operators to create teams that could adapt to any environment or equipment condition. Your grandfather was one of the few individuals who excelled at both roles, technical and tactical." Harrington closed the folder. "When I saw your shooting demonstration at Fort Braxton, I recognized something I hadn't seen since Longshot was discontinued. The integrated sniper unit is my attempt to resurrect that concept for modern warfare, creating operators who understand both the science and art of precision combat." "Is that why you selected me for this program, sir, because of my grandfather?" "I selected you because you demonstrated exceptional ability," Harrington corrected. "Your lineage simply helped me recognize what I was seeing." He stood. "The final exercise begins at World 500 tomorrow. It will test everything you've learned these past 6 months." The final exercise began in pre-dawn darkness, with the remaining candidates divided into 2 teams. Emma found herself designated as team leader for a 4-person element, with Dixon assigned as her second-in-command, a pairing that would test their developing professional relationship. "This exercise simulates a real-world extraction mission in hostile territory," Miller explained, as he distributed mission packets. "Your objective: locate and recover sensitive equipment from a downed aircraft, then extract to a designated pickup zone within 72 hours. You'll face opposition forces, environmental challenges, and equipment failures." As the teams prepared to move out, Dixon approached Emma. "Your show, Reynolds. What's the plan?" Emma studied the map, identifying potential routes and hazards. "We'll take the eastern approach through these ridgelines. It offers better concealment and multiple sniper positions overlooking the crash site." She looked up at Dixon. "I need your tactical expertise for the movement plan." Dixon seemed surprised by Emma's direct acknowledgement of his strengths. "I'll work up a movement plan with alternating security elements. We should reach the ridge overlooking the crash site by nightfall if we maintain good pace." Emma nodded. "Good. Let's brief the team and move out before full light." The first day proceeded largely according to plan. Emma's team moved efficiently through dense forest, maintaining security while avoiding detection by the opposition force. Dixon's tactical experience complemented Emma's route planning, resulting in minimal exposure and good progress toward their objective. By nightfall, they had reached the observation point overlooking the simulated crash site. Initial reconnaissance revealed 6 opposition force members guarding the sensitive equipment. The team established a hidden position and began formulating their approach. We could wait for darkness tomorrow, suggested Specialist Garcia, the communications expert. Use the night to our advantage. Dixon shook his head. The pickup is scheduled for 0500 2 days from now at a location nearly 20 miles from here. We need to secure the package and be moving by noon tomorrow to make the extraction window. Emma considered their options, studying the terrain through her scope. We need a diversion to draw attention while we extract the equipment. She turned to Dixon. If we create a diversion at the southern perimeter, how many guards would likely respond? Dixon analyzed the opposition positions, something that suggests a team approach could draw 4 guards, leaving minimal security on the objective. Emma made her decision quickly but confidently, a marked improvement from her earlier hesitation. Dixon and Chen will create a diversion at first light, suggesting a frontal assault from the south. Garcia and I will approach via the streambed, secure the equipment, and extract northward. We'll rendezvous at Checkpoint Alpha by noon. The team spent the night refining the plan and preparing their equipment. Emma noticed a new dynamic emerging, her technical planning complemented by Dixon's tactical expertise, creating a more effective operation than either could have designed alone. At dawn, the operation commenced with precision timing. Dixon and Chen executed the diversion flawlessly, drawing 4 guards away from the objective. Emma and Garcia approached through the streambed undetected, neutralized the remaining guards with synchronized tranquilizer rounds, and secured the sensitive equipment. The entire operation took less than 7 minutes, a testament to the team's growing effectiveness and Emma's improving leadership. At Checkpoint Alpha, the team reassembled successfully, but faced an unexpected challenge when simulated artillery fire damaged Garcia's communications equipment. Communications compromised, he reported. Backup systems also damaged. Emma assessed the situation quickly. Without communications, they couldn't confirm the extraction point or call for support if engaged. The technical specialist in her wanted to attempt repairs, but the developing tactical leader recognized that continuing the mission was paramount. Dixon, can you navigate to the primary extraction point without GPS or radio confirmation? Emma asked. Dixon nodded. I memorized the route and have analog backups. Then we proceed as planned with additional security measures. Emma decided without hesitation. Chen, you're on point. Dixon, manage our route and pace. Garcia and I will alternate rear security with the package. We maintain communications discipline with hand signals only. If we encounter opposition, we evade rather than engage unless absolutely necessary. The next 18 hours tested every aspect of their training. They faced simulated ambushes, difficult terrain, and deteriorating weather as they pushed toward extraction. Emma's technical background proved invaluable when they encountered a ravine crossing that required improvised rope systems. Her understanding of mechanical advantage allowed them to create a crossing that supported both personnel and equipment with minimal materials. Throughout the movement, Emma noticed the transformation in team dynamics. Dixon now supported her decisions without question, while Garcia and Chen demonstrated complete trust in her judgment. They had become a cohesive unit, combining their individual strengths to overcome each obstacle. By 400 on the final morning, the team reached the vicinity of the extraction point, exhausted but intact. As they prepared for the final approach, Emma gathered the team for a last briefing. We've come this far together. Now we need one final push to secure the LZ before extraction arrives. Dixon, what's your assessment? Dixon studied the darkened clearing. Minimal cover in the final 100 meters. High probability of opposition presence. I recommend we establish overwatch positions and clear the LZ before exposing the package. Emma nodded her agreement. Chen and I will move to these elevated positions to provide overwatch. Dixon, you and Garcia clear the LZ once we're in position. Any opposition encountered should be neutralized silently if possible. The team executed the plan with practiced efficiency. Through her scope, Emma detected 2 hidden observation posts where opposition forces waited in ambush. Using hand signals, she communicated these positions to Dixon, who adjusted his approach accordingly. With precision movement, Dixon and Garcia neutralized both opposition elements without alerting any reinforcements. At precisely 0455, 5 minutes before scheduled extraction, the landing zone was secure. Emma's team had accomplished every aspect of their mission, despite multiple challenges and unforeseen complications. The sound of approaching helicopters signaled the conclusion of the exercise. As the aircraft touched down, Master Sergeant Miller emerged from one, accompanied by Colonel Harrington. Exercise complete, Miller announced. All mission objectives accomplished within parameters. Well done, candidates. The exhausted team exchanged looks of pride and relief. They had endured 6 months of intensive training or culminating in a grueling 72-hour field exercise and had proven their capabilities beyond question. Back at Fort Garrison, after much-needed showers and hot meals, the remaining candidates assembled for final evaluations. Colonel Harrington stood before them, reviewing performance notes as they waited to learn their fates. The Integrated Sniper Unit represents a new concept in military special operations, Harrington began. Over the past 6 months, we've tested your technical knowledge, marksmanship, precision, tactical awareness, physical endurance, and leadership capabilities. Of the 12 candidates who began this program, 7 have demonstrated the necessary skills to complete it. Harrington paced slowly before them. However, the operational team deploying to Afghanistan next month will consist of only 5 personnel. The selections have been made based on comprehensive evaluation of your individual strengths and team dynamics. Emma felt her heartbeat accelerate as Harrington prepared to announce the selections. The following candidates have been selected for the operational ISU team, Harrington announced. Staff Sergeant Dixon Specialist Garcia, Private Chen, and Sergeant Rodriguez. He paused, extending the moment of tension before adding, and Specialist Reynolds, who will serve as the team's technical operations lead with battlefield promotion to sergeant. Relief flooded through Emma, followed by surprise at the unexpected leadership designation. Technical operations lead was a position she hadn't known existed within the ISU structure. As the group dispersed, Master Sergeant Miller approached Emma. Technical operations lead, he said with approval. A position created specifically for someone with your unique combination of skills. Your grandfather would have recognized it. It's essentially the role he filled during several classified operations. Emma nodded, still processing the significance of her selection. Thank you for pushing me beyond my comfort zone, Sergeant. I wouldn't have developed the necessary leadership skills without your guidance. Miller shook his head. You had those capabilities all along, Reynolds. You just needed the right circumstances to bring them out. He extended his hand, which Emma shook firmly. Your grandfather told me once that true potential is rarely recognized by others until you recognize it in yourself. You've done that these past 6 months. 2 weeks later, Emma returned to Fort Braxton to complete her transfer paperwork. Walking through familiar corridors felt surreal. The buildings remained the same, but her perspective had completely changed. She no longer saw herself as someone who belonged in the background. Her technical expertise, combined with newly developed leadership abilities, positioned her to contribute at the highest levels of military service. Master Sergeant Brooks greeted her at the armory with obvious pride and introduced her to Specialist Thompson, who had inherited her maintenance responsibilities. Your technical documentation has been invaluable, Thompson told her. The maintenance procedures you developed have improved our efficiency significantly. Emma felt satisfaction knowing her years of meticulous work continued to benefit the unit even after her departure. As she prepared to leave the armory, Emma noticed a small plaque mounted beside her former workbench. It read simply, Reynolds' Station, where excellence begins. The recognition touched her deeply. Lieutenant Carter was conducting training when Emma visited the range where her journey had begun 6 months earlier. He called a brief break to speak with her privately. I heard about your graduation, he said with genuine respect. Technical operations lead. That's quite an achievement for someone who supposedly just cleaned weapons. Emma smiled at the reference to his old dismissive attitude. The technical knowledge I gained in maintenance work provided advantages I hadn't anticipated. Understanding weapon systems thoroughly made the tactical application more intuitive. Carter nodded. Your success has changed how we think about identifying and developing talent on this base. We've started evaluating soldiers for advanced training based on demonstrated abilities rather than just current assignments. This revelation pleased Emma more than her individual achievements. If her experience had contributed to better talent recognition throughout the military, the impact extended far beyond her personal career advancement. There's something else, Carter continued. Sergeant Wilson applied for helicopter pilot training. She cited your example as inspiration for pursuing opportunities she had previously considered beyond her reach. Emma felt pride in knowing her willingness to challenge assumptions had encouraged others to reconsider their own limitations. 2 months later, Emma found herself in the mountains of eastern Afghanistan, leading her ISU team on their first operational mission. The 5-person unit had deployed to support a SEAL team operation targeting high-value intelligence in Taliban-controlled territory. The mission required both technical expertise and precision shooting under extreme conditions, exactly the combination the ISU had been designed to provide. Emma's team was tasked with establishing overwatch positions and providing both security and technical support for the operation. As dawn broke over the rugged landscape, Emma settled into position on a ridge overlooking the target compound. Through her scope, she could see the SEAL team approaching their objective. Her rifle rested steady against her shoulder, the same position her grandfather had taught her years ago on a Montana ranch. Target compound is showing unexpected activity, Dixon reported from his observation post. Additional guards on the northern approach. SEALs will be exposed if they continue on current path. Emma assessed the situation quickly. Garcia relayed to SEAL command. Recommend route adjustment to eastern approach. Chen prepare to provide covering fire if needed. As she awaited the SEAL team's response, Emma noticed something through her scope that others had missed: subtle movement on a distant ridgeline that suggested a Taliban spotter position. If accurate, this meant the entire operation was already compromised. Emma made her calculations instantly: wind speed, temperature, humidity, elevation difference, bullet drop over 200 yards. Factors that would make such a shot impossible for most marksmen, but for Emma, they were simply variables in an equation she had been solving since childhood. I have a possible hostile observation post at bearing 057 range, approximately 200 yards, Emma reported calmly. Request permission to engage. Negative, came the SEAL commander's response. Unconfirmed target at that range exceeds mission parameters. Hold position. Emma watched through her scope as the distant figure adjusted something that reflected sunlight, almost certainly optics being used to observe the approaching SEAL team. In seconds, the entire operation would be compromised, putting American lives at risk. In that moment, Emma made the kind of leadership decision she had struggled with during training, a decision with incomplete information, significant consequences, and no time for extended analysis. Target confirmed hostile, she stated firmly. Engaging now to protect primary operation. Emma controlled her breathing, found that perfect space between heartbeats her grandfather had taught her, and squeezed the trigger with smooth, consistent pressure. The shot broke the morning stillness. Through her scope, Emma watched as the bullet traveled for nearly 2 seconds before striking the distant figure with precision that seemed to defy physics. Target neutralized, she reported. What followed was a textbook operation. With the observation post eliminated, the SEAL team adjusted their approach based on Emma's intelligence and successfully completed their mission without casualties. Later, the SEAL commander approached Emma's position as they prepared for extraction. That shot at 1,200 yards saved my men, he said simply. Intel confirms it was a Taliban forward observer with a radio. If they'd alerted the compound, we'd have walked into an ambush. Just doing my job, Commander, Emma replied. No, he corrected. That was beyond just a job. That kind of shot is something you hear about but never witness, the kind that changes what you believe is possible. As the extraction helicopters approached, Emma reflected on her journey. From the invisible maintenance specialist to technical operations lead of an elite unit, she had transformed not just her career, but her understanding of her own capabilities. 6 months later, Emma sat in a briefing room at a forward operating base, now leading an expanded ISU program with 3 operational teams under her command. The concept had proven so successful that Colonel Harrington had received authorization to develop additional units based on the same integrated model. On her desk sat a worn leather notebook, her grandfather's journal now supplemented with Emma's own observations and techniques. Beside it lay a photograph of her first operational team taken after their successful deployment. Dixon stood at her right hand, Garcia and Chen flanking them. No longer just colleagues, but brothers and sisters in arms who had forged bonds through shared challenges and mutual respect. Major Williams, the base commander, entered with a group of new candidates for the expanded ISU program. Sergeant Reynolds will be overseeing your training, he explained to the assembled soldiers, at a mix of combat veterans and technical specialists, all looking somewhat uncertain about this unconventional unit. Emma stood to address them, remembering her own journey from skepticism to belonging. Welcome to the Integrated Sniper Unit, she began. Each of you is here because someone recognized potential in you that transcends traditional military classifications. Some of you are combat soldiers who need to develop technical expertise. Others are technical specialists who need to develop tactical skills. All of you will become something new operators who understand both the science and the art of precision operations. As she looked at their faces, some eager, some doubtful, all attentive, Emma recognized her grandfather's legacy extending beyond her personal journey. The Integrated Sniper Unit represented a new approach to military specialization, one that valued both technical knowledge and tactical ability equally. The military has traditionally divided us into those who fight and those who support, Emma concluded. But the modern battlefield demands more. It demands operators who can adapt to any challenge, who understand not just how to use their equipment, but why it works the way it does. That's what we're building here, a new kind of soldier for a new kind of warfare. As the briefing concluded and Emma prepared for the day's training exercises, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the window glass. The quiet, invisible maintenance specialist was gone forever, replaced by a confident leader who had learned that limitations are often self-imposed and that excellence can emerge from the most unexpected sources. The rifle case at her feet held the Remington 700 her grandfather had given her, a bridge between generations of excellence that had found new expression in the mountains of Afghanistan and would continue to influence military operations for years to come. Emma Reynolds had found her true calling, and she was prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead, both as a technical expert and as a leader of those who had once considered her invisible.